You're listening to Reboot.
Reboot.
A study from the government revealed that only 50% of returning vets who need veteran mental health treatment actually get those services. Both active duty service members and veterans face barriers to treatment for mental issues. The fear of being seen as weak, the stigma associated with mental health issues, personal embarrassment about service-related mental disabilities, long wait times to receive mental health treatment. These issues are real. And this podcast understands that. Welcome to Reboot. The war isn't over yet. David Kagi and Jared Standiford, with a combined 20 years of service in the U.S. Navy. Both have had many struggles with mental health, and both see a growing epidemic in the military community. But we're working together to reach out to help the community recognize that mental health is important. This is Reboot, and this is David and Jared.
Hey everybody on Facebook. We are live. We're ready to begin. Change this. There we go. Alright. Cool. And let's start recording this podcast. Hey everybody. Welcome to another episode of Reboot. The war isn't over yet. My name is David and I have Jared here. How are you doing this week, Jared?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing good. Finished my first week of work at the new job. Very tired. very, very tired. It's a very interesting job. I love it. I definitely feel like I've done something at the end of the day, which is nice. But I have not been this sore or tired in a long time.
There's a lot of physical, moving around, climbing up and down stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'm used to being on my feet. I've been on my feet a lot over my life. I've worked on a lot of stuff over my life, but I've never been so consistently busy. The guy who's training me, he's like, this has been an unusually busy week. So it's not just that the job is normally this rough. It's just this week in particular was really rough. So I haven't done this job before. I haven't really been in this job before. So it's kind of rough.
It's probably actually a good thing, really, because you probably get to see more that way. There's more stuff happening, so it's probably a better training environment.
Right. No, it's good for training because I'm on the blow molding setup team right now. So what that consists of is every time they need to switch over production from one bottle to another, we go in, we take out the molds, take down all the other pieces and parts, and then put in the new tooling for the new job, and then do the initial calibrations, and then the actual operator team will come in and start up the machine.
Nice.
And so for instance, on Wednesday we had almost completely set up a machine, and then our supervisor came by and was like, "Hey, by the way, the customer just canceled this job. So we need you guys to go ahead and take everything out." We had got through the hard part, which is getting all the tooling in, the molds in, and all that. And we were getting ready to do the calibration, which is honestly the easy part. And
yeah,
take it all out.
Yeah, that's about those are kind of good experiences sometimes though, because you kind of learn to check yourself too. Because I know, when I was deep in my mental health issues, that would have set me off, and now I'm trying to get better with stuff like that, to where kind of take the more stoic approach and say, nothing that happens to you is good or bad. It is just how you perceive it. So
right.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm still getting paid to do this. This is just now my job's to take what I put up back apart. I'm kind of
right.
Yeah, it's a little bit annoying. I'm moving rocks from one place to the other basically, and then moving them back again, but yeah, whatever.
I mean, it didn't really bother me.
Yeah.
It more bothered me. So my company has profit sharing, right? And
so that bothers you.
It bothered me from a money standpoint, because I was man, these guys just cancel. Then we better be charging them for canceling this order, because
there better be a cancellation fee,
right? Because at this point, we had already put in 5 hours that day, and the night crew who started it had put in probably 6 hours. So we're at 11 hours of work, across two people, so 22 man hours of work into changing over this machine to make this bottle for these people, and then they cancel it, and I was like, "Excuse me."
Yeah. It gives you an appreciation for like why those cancellation fees and stuff like that are there.
Yes.
Because I
Yes.
know that's a discussion that my wife and I have actually had. Is that so her family, like her brother and her dad are both in sales, tech sales.
Mm-hmm.
So she is seeing heavily the sales side of how things work and how they work. Whereas I grew up in a mechanic shop and my dad was providing a service. So it's a little different to where, like, the salesperson, you're trying to, sell the product and present the product in the way that somebody will buy it. Whereas my dad's business was people would come in for kind of an essential service to work on their car. And a lot of times you'd end up with the customer haggling with you. And it's kind of the other way around. It's kind of just like a reverse thing. So I have a little more empathy for the person that's running the business sometimes. Like, when I go to a shop, like I almost feel bad haggling sometimes because I've seen what happens with that. And I've seen, like, and that's something I have to overcome because I feel like I sometimes get taken advantage of in those situations because I don't want to haggle. I just don't want to do it.
Right.
Whereas my wife is like, no, we're not paying that. She's like all about, she's going to go after it. She's ruthless to deal with sales stuff, which, to be honest, I should just put her in those situations most of the time because I know she's going to be better at it. Like if we go to buy a car or something like that, I just need to swallow my pride and be like, here you go. You can do it because you're going to be better at this.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I love the job though. It's, I come home, I'm exhausted at the end of the day. And I've been so sore this week. I haven't turned a wrench since October of last year, really. I'm sitting there turning wrenches, moving 150 pound molds, getting like in weird positions to put like tooling in and stuff, and it's rough. But I mean, the job itself, it's fascinating. Plastic is a fascinating industry that I'm obviously learning a lot about really quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The only thing I've seen in the news for plastic lately is that plant in Texas, Grand Prairie, Texas. Have you seen that?
Mm-mm.
There's some plastics. I think it's a plastics or a petrochemical facility that's on fire and has been on fire for days, and it's pretty impressive. But I don't think, obviously you're doing the molding. I think they're actually making the plastic, like making the material.
Yeah, I mean, we take like they're plastic pellets, and there's various different kinds of plastics we have on site depending on what kind of bottle we're making and whatnot. But
so I'm going to kind of give you what I think I understand about it, and tell me if I'm right. So they take the pellets, you melt them down and blow them into a mold, and that's what makes your thing. Cool it down, and then you got, that's probably a very simplistic view, but that's kind of what you guys do.
I mean, honestly, that is what we're doing, though. I mean, so you have the pellets, you melt them, and you don't realize like how terrible molten plastic is until you go to work with it. Like it's very sticky.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Yeah, so like so when we go to like retool a machine, so we have like a barrel, okay, with a screw in it, and that's kind of how you move the molten plastic. And so that pushes it positive displacement style into a heating head, and then that heating head will then drive it into down, okay? And so that head is specific for the job, usually. I mean, so like there's like 2 barrel heads, 3 barrel heads, 4, depending on how many bottles you're trying to make at the same time. Those machines usually have somewhere between 2 and 6 heads, from what I've seen. I'm very novice at this still, but and so we have to take those heads off sometimes. So my second day, we're getting ready to remove this head, and so I'm up on top of this machine. There's nowhere really to stand. We're outside the safety railing at this point, and it's like little bars and stuff. And I'm like trying. And someone was a jerk. someone put one of those bolts on real tight, and I'm sitting there, and I slipped. And I did this bad boy.
Yeah, there you go.
It's a burn and a scratch.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that from Steam System when you're working on something hot. Like you slip, and not only do you bust your knuckle, but you burn it, and you're like, ah.
Yeah. So, but those, so you have to also clean. So there's heating bands, kind of like similar to like what we'd have on the pressurizer and stuff. Like, and you gotta take those bands off. You turn them off and then take them off right before you remove certain elements. And then you gotta get them off and then get all the plastic off the tooling, because if you don't, it's gonna harden.
I was gonna say you're doing it while it's still hot because you're trying to get it off.
Right. Otherwise, it'll harden, and then you gotta sit there. If it hardens, then you have to sit there with a freaking blowtorch. just like
Heat it up.
heat it up and get it off, and it's just,
Not fun.
no. So I mean, the whole process is somewhat of a pain, but it's amazing. Like watching the machines work and then learning different parts of the machine, learning how to calibrate and adjust the machines to fix different issues. Like, oh, this bottle had a little bit of extra fleshing, flash coming off the side of the bottle. How we fix that part? Like,
Yeah. Well, and you enjoy swinging wrenches, right? Like
oh, yeah.
you yeah. And see, it's kind of weird for me. Like I have found that, I grew up swinging wrenches, like in my dad's mechanic shop, but I honestly don't enjoy it all that much.
No.
I did it, I'm good at it. I'm good at problem solving through it, but I think I enjoy the operations aspect of things more.
Right.
And that's just something I've realized over the years.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, I love the job. I have a ton of work learned still. I'm still on so this whole week I was doing setups and takedowns, and I was doing that on the blow molding floor. I think next week they're gonna have me doing like the actual process stuff, which is where you make like the process more efficient, making sure you get good quality bottles, et cetera, et cetera.
So what is there a specific part of this that you're training to do, or are you just overall, are you just kind of jack of all trades?
These are all technician positions. So
okay.
I'm technically going to be a process technician, which is the one who takes care of making things efficient, but I'm going to be doing it in their new clean facility, which they currently have 0 technicians in.
Okay.
Right now,
but they're teaching you the whole process kind of right now, which is good.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, because sometimes process technicians have to actually do takedowns and setups too. But
right.
because there's only one which I think is kind of silly. There's only one team that's dedicated to setups and takedowns. So I don't know. I'm still learning. So maybe that's the right way to do it. But like right now, they don't have any process technicians in the clean room. And so eventually I'll be staffing up the clean room as one of the only technicians.
It's going to be your baby.
Yeah. But I mean, so all the machines right now in the clean room are all injection molding. And so I'm assuming I'm going to sit on blow molding for a little bit, learn all the blow molding stuff, because it's completely different. The injection molding and blow molding, from what I've seen, is just 100% different. Like the same typical concept where you're using, a mold and you're molding plastic, but the way that you get the bottle or cap or whatever you're making out of it is just 100% different.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, I could sit here and talk about all the different things I've learned this week, but the big thing is I actually feel great right now, just because I feel like I'm useful again. I'm doing something. I'm making money. And honestly, it's the best work environment I've ever had.
Nice.
And so I can't stress that enough. It's a great work environment. So
it's good. That's good. And it's good that you're like learning that. I would encourage you to journal on that a bit too, and like write down what you like about it so that you can kind of capture that for later too. Cause there's going to be low days, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But having that captured so you remember it. Cause like things that I've learned. So I've learned over the years that I enjoy the operations aspect of things the most, I think. Swinging wrenches, it's okay. I don't mind doing it, but it's not like my passion. I don't think I want to go be a mechanic. I don't think that's what I would want to do. I thought I did when I was younger, but I have learned that that's not really for me. I have learned that working in an office is not my ideal scenario. That's where I am right now. And it's a great job and I get paid well. And the schedule, the biggest selling point for my job right now is the schedule. It's the best schedule I think you could possibly ever have, but it's not the office environment. I have a hard time focusing, sitting at a desk all day long. I would much rather be standing up, moving around like you are. But that stuff, like, I've been journaling about that actually the last couple of days. I have a lot of time right now. My family's in Texas. So I miss them. If you're watching this, Katie, I miss you and I miss my kids. But, yeah, just being by myself, I have time to journal about stuff like that. And that's one of the things I've started to do, kind of partly cued in because of what you're going through, starting a new job. I started like doing some writing about that and like, what are my values? What do I like? And what do I want to do moving forward? And, what's in my future?
Right.
And I think that's a good conversation to have with yourself every once in a while, because your values do change over time.
Right.
Like when you were single and didn't have kids, like you definitely didn't value family as much as you do now. I guarantee in that. And
that's true. That is a true statement.
Stuff changes over time. And that's one of the things I've seen, like with my wife and kids being in Texas with my wife's parents, is I look at that and I see like the effect that environment has on my kids. And it's a very positive effect. My my wife's been making a lot of positive changes with them, and she has support from the grandparents on it, and it's a really good environment. And I see that, and I'm like, man, maybe we should be closer to them, and that's something I start thinking about. You start going down the rabbit hole, thinking about all the things you could do different.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that we could all do a little differently, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I keep finding that out as I go along.
Yeah. Well, and so that's was it in it's in that poem, If, Rudyard Kipling,
Yep.
who talks about if you can dream but not make dreams your master.
Yep.
That's kind of that statement right there. Like,
Right.
It's okay to dream and think about what you would like to do or what you think you might like to do better, but it shouldn't overtake your life. And like, you focus so much on that you're not putting everything you have into the tasks that are in front of you and what you're doing.
Right. Oh, but yeah, so doing good, enjoying the job. I'll officially retire from the Navy this next week. It'll be official. I'm probably gonna take some PTO time so I can get an ID.
Did you get all your paperwork so that you can take care of all your medical stuff?
So I'm ready to go once I'm actually out of the Navy and once the VA can actually do something for me.
They have to just break it so that you can go do it now, but you have all the paperwork in hand so you can go take care of it. All right.
Yeah, as soon as because Saturday rolls around, I'll probably head over to the VA.
Mm-hmm.
Like, give me medication, please.
Yeah.
I would like to be more stable than I am right now.
be prepared for that. The VA can be. I don't know how the VA is going to be up there. It's very, very situational.
Yeah.
And you just have to learn with the VA. Have you dealt with the VA much yet, or at all?
Just like for my appointments to get evaluated for discharge, and then I've been working with my VA rep who's down in Virginia about getting
so you got somebody to help you a little bit. So the big thing I've learned with my wife's dealing with the VA and stuff is they have a process, and their process, there was a lot of time there where I was just so annoyed with the process that I would just kind of freeze up because I was just angry at how the process is. But you're not going to change the process. The process is what it is. So you kind of just got to learn to play within the boundaries and make it work for you. And that's, my wife has gotten very, very good at that. And it might not seem fair and it might not seem like they're doing the right thing, but they're good people. It's not that the VA is bad people. It's just that they're, especially in some of the places where I've lived, like the Stratton VA in New York and in Arizona, the Phoenix VA. The Phoenix VA is, oh God, it's so overwhelmed. Like there's so many people, and it's it's not that they're bad people. Yeah. They're just so overwhelmed.
A big part is the volume that they have to deal with, and I don't know how the Syracuse VA is. I know there's a VA hospital here in Syracuse. I don't know.
Yeah,
I feel like it should be fairly underutilized. I would assume, just because.
Which for you is kind of a good thing.
Yeah, that's a good thing. Yeah, there's not a lot of. I feel like there's not a ton of veterans around here because it's not a military town. Like there is Fort Drum up to the north. Mm-hmm. And Fort Drum's a pretty big, mountain division or
that's
mountain.
Mountain. Yeah, 10th Mountain. That's what it is.
Is up there, but like a lot of Army guys, I feel like don't go get stationed up there and then stay up there. So.
Yeah, New York, I think, is kind of a niche place for a lot of people. I mean, there's a lot of great things in New York. It's a beautiful state.
Right.
But
it's not, I feel like a lot of military people don't stay in this area. And so it's really just the people that join and come back, I feel like, for the most part. And there's an Air National Guard base here, but.
Yeah, they don't have that much staffing, though. National Guard bases are.
Right. So I feel pretty confident that, that'll be all right. I'll be okay with that. So.
Yeah.
Well, I'll find out when I go to do it.
Yeah, and like I said, I would just take it as it comes and try not to get frustrated and just work through the process. Because I think once you get set up it might be frustrating for the first few weeks, but once you're set up, it'll probably be pretty smooth.
Right. I'm preparing for the next couple of weeks to still be rough and to potentially still not have any new medication.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that. Like I've gotten to the point where my wife is aware, I'm aware, and between the two of us, we're working together to make sure that I'm balanced. And
always good to have the spouse on board.
Yeah. Like that's where we're at. It's not using the lack of my medication as an excuse. It's more of a balancing without it and being more mindful of the fact that I don't have it. And so things that would normally set me off could set me off just because emotionally I can't handle it. And so we're just both very aware of that. If I feel it coming on, sometimes I was like, hey, Ash, it's happening. It takes a lot of awareness for myself more than her. So
yeah, and that's big. That's, it's good that you've built that self-awareness. That's, self-awareness is kind of like an onion. I feel like just when you feel like you have it, you find another layer.
Right.
And just like an onion, at the center of all that is probably a bunch of tears.
Right.
And it's an interesting thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think we'll move on from that. One thing I definitely want to talk about, earlier this week, I had shared an article to our page where the Secretary of Defense had discussed a $2.2 billion cut to military health care. And then later on, it was like a day or two later, Trump came out because he was asked about it at one of the briefings. And Trump said, "We will do nothing to hurt our great military professionals, and here as long as I'm your president, thank you." Which is like, it's like a political, it's kind election season, but I mean, I want to talk about cutting $2.2 billion to military healthcare and what that would mean. Like, I know before I left Virginia, for instance, I think I'm finally going to talk about something that I haven't talked about on the podcast yet. Before I left Virginia, there was an office that was specifically for sexual assault victims. People who had recently dealt with sexual assault, sexual harassment, mostly assaults. They had some like major harassment cases in there where it was like literally like command harassment. But but most of the the people who were going to that office dealt with sexual assaults. And it was kind of like a mental health office where they kind of focus on mental health, but it was the mental health side of the sexual assault. And not too long before I left, they closed that office down. And part of the reason they cited, part of it was because of COVID, and the other part of it was budget issues or something like that. But that office got closed, which I think is a huge mistake. And I see, $2.2 billion coming out of the defense health care budget. What are they going to cut first? They're going to cut things that they see as less necessary.
Mental health and things like that. I can't even fathom how much that will affect the military healthcare system. Yeah, it's so kind of the unfortunate thing about a system like the military healthcare system and anything. I mean, any system that is based on you have a pot of money and that's all you have, is rationing is going to happen. No matter what, rationing is going to happen because you have a finite amount of resources and you have to spend them in a certain way. So you have to decide who gets what care and what care you're willing to pay for. So when you make that pot smaller, more rationing is going to happen. And that's just a reality. What is going to get rationed, we don't know, and we probably won't know until it happens.
Right.
But I know like one good thing that happened, and I'm not trying to get political and say like one person's better than the other, but one good thing that has happened with the current administration for my family is that they funded the, I can't remember the name of the program now. So there's a program with the VA now. It's existed for a few years, I think, but they will send people out in town for appointments if you can't meet a certain timeline in the VA to get that appointment. I think it's 30 days. So if you go to see a specialist, like for example, in Phoenix, neurological care in Phoenix, because of the more elderly population, is very, very in demand. So the VA neurologists are swamped. You can't get an appointment within 30 days. You just can't.
Right.
So they would send you out in town to a private practice and they would pay for it. But that was only funded like month to month when it was first created, or it was either month to month or every 3 months or something like that. It wasn't fully funded. So when they ran out of money, they ran out of money. So they couldn't send any more people out in town once they ran out of money.
Right.
And they were blowing through their budget right away because obviously everybody needs that care. So they're just blowing through the budget, and they'd run out, and then they'd have to approve more money. One good thing that this administration did is they funded that through the end of the year. They wrote a blank check. They said, whatever it takes, we'll pay it through the end of the year. And I was like, that helped my family because that was good. But that's a money issue, just like this. So if they cut that affects me. That means that my wife might not be able to go to the neurologist she goes to right now. They might say, well, why don't you go back to the VA and wait, which I don't want. We have very good results with where we're at right now, and I would like to stick with what we have. So, I mean, you have to make difficult decisions at that point. Do you pay through like my insurance, my private insurance, which is probably going to cost, but what's it worth to you? And right. I don't know. I'm not happy to see it. I hope it's just posturing and it doesn't happen, but we'll see.
Well, we saw this with Secretary of the Navy, what was it, a year and a half ago, when they're like, well, I guess we're just going to have to decommission the Truman. Because, and I was on the ship at the time when they said that. I was like, all right.
Do it. Do it.
Do it. You won't.
Yeah.
But, they said, instead of doing a midlife refueling, we'll just decommission the Truman if you're not going to give us more money to operate our ships. And, and sometimes it's posturing like that, well, if you're not going to give us the extra money, this is what we're going to have to cut.
Yep.
And to try to get the extra money that they want.
Well, and who knows if they're serious about it? Like, it seems like an extreme thing, but it might be. We don't know the budget well enough. They might be like, if you're not going to give us the money, we can't afford the fuel. So
right.
Like,
this
is what you're giving up if you don't give us the money, and we both know that military budgets are super inflated, and that's a process that needs reform. But what I don't want is I would love to see a drawdown in the military, as in force reduction, bring a lot of the troops home, like stop spending so much time overseas. But I don't want the quality to go down. That's the thing, is I want the waste, fraud, and abuse and the excesses to be cut, but I don't want the quality to go down.
Well, you and I both know where the fraud, waste, and abuse occurs. It occurs in the supply system.
Yeah. A toilet seat doesn't cost hundreds of dollars. Right. Like the contracting system is ridiculous. Like I remember a specific case where we were buying, I won't say what it's for because it might be classified what it's for, but it's basically a D-ring that you would put like to hold the ramps in a trailer. If you ever used a car trailer, that D-ring that holds in it, you can buy one of those for cents at a Home Depot. The one we had to buy for the Navy was like $100 for that D-ring.
Right.
And it's just like, how this doesn't make any sense. This is dumb. We're wasting taxpayer money. But
yeah. So Jessica, who's watching, brings up a good point that I just want to throw in there because it's true. She goes, you almost have to research VA hospitals and care prior to moving to make sure they have services you need, which is so true.
So that's true. That's also, like you said, with the thing, they'll send you out in town. If they can't provide you that service, they will send you out in town. So like, for example,
supposed to, but I know people that have had trouble getting the referrals to go out in town.
Yep. So it's a battle. It's a battle to do that. And like I said, the funding had been an issue. The rest of this year, it's been great. But with this cut, I don't know if that's going to be an issue again. So that's something that my family went through a lot of, especially like, because my wife's medically retired as well. So like when she was pregnant, like VAs don't really have a need for pregnancy services, so they don't have them. So they had to send her out in town for that, but they did send her out in town.
Right.
Like, but it makes sense, right? Like you don't really have a lot of disabled veterans that are in need of that, so they don't maintain those services.
Right, but and then also if like you live in a military town, sometimes they'll send you to a military treatment facility too. So depending on what kind of, if you still have TRICARE, for instance, they'll send you to a military treatment facility.
Yeah. Well, and TRICARE is kind of like, it's better than the VA in that you kind of do have they still ration to a point,
right,
but you kind of do have a blank check for some of that stuff. Like they're not going to deny you if you absolutely need it.
Right.
Where they deny you though is like, I've heard plenty of stories of people that like had a knee injury or a shoulder injury or something like that, and they slow roll it, and they say go do physical therapy and take some Motrin, and when they should have had an MRI like right away. They just don't want to do it. And
yeah, so that's one of the things that my wife and I are discussing now. So I can't make a decision for the first 60 days, but at my new job they have obviously a healthcare plan that I can buy into. The employer pays, I think it's like 70%, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
But you know, obviously because I'm medically retired, we have TRICARE, so I don't necessarily have to buy into, you know, the company healthcare plan. But then, you know, some that we were looking into the company's healthcare plan, they cover a lot of different things that TRICARE just won't cover. So it's one of those things.
One thing I would look at with that too, I'm not sure, and maybe I might have to talk to my wife and get back to you about this and see exactly how it works. So one thing that we do is, so my wife has that, so she has her medical stuff through the VA that we do a lot of our stuff through, and then I have healthcare that also covers the whole family. And one thing that we do is, so I have the choice of getting like what you'd call like the Cadillac plan, the one where they pay for almost everything, but you have a high monthly premium.
Yeah.
Or you can do the lower monthly premium, which is like the consumer driven health plan, I think was what it's called, CDHP.
Yeah.
So I have the consumer driven health plan. So it's cheaper every month, and I have an HSA that I pay, a health savings account that I pay into. The reason that's good for my family is you can actually use the money that the VA pays on stuff. You can claim that on your deductible, even though you're not paying it. So some of that stuff goes on their deductible.
I've looked into that.
And yeah, because
there's like two different options for us at the company. So
yeah, and that if you can do that, it makes it kind of worth it, because we hit our deductible by like July usually every year. So even though it's a very high deductible, we're not paying most of that money. Most of that money is not coming out of our pocket, but it hits the deductible. So I'm paying a lower monthly premium. We hit a deductible, and there are still some services that I have to pay a copay with at that point, but it's very low. It's, you know, small percentages. So it ends up being a better deal for us. You know, something to look at.
Yeah, because I wasn't sure what I was going to do with that. So that's actually good reading for me to do. I'll have to get, because I have like the benefits book.
You do.
Read the benefits book a little bit closer.
You do take a little bit of the risk, like early in the year. If you take a big medical cost early in the year, you're gonna get hammered. But because, like, you know, there's one of the treatments that my wife gets like every 3 months that's pretty expensive. So that first one of the year, we're gonna get hammered, and we know it. We know that it's coming, right?
For it. So
yeah.
So yeah, it's good to know. Good stuff to know. Good things for me to think about for sure. But you know, getting back to the money cut. I mean, you know, obviously you and I are very concerned about mental health coverage. You know, and just seeing that this budget cut hasn't happened yet, and seeing the office in Portsmouth Naval Hospital get shut down for sexual assault victims. I hope you're ready. Because I'm not. All right. So, I got sexually assaulted. There you go. Said it. Boom. It happened many years ago. I don't want to talk about it, but I'm going to.
Well, appreciate you sharing. It's important.
Yeah. So, I've talked a lot about trust issues on the podcast over the time here. This was just another one of those giant trust deductions, I guess you'd say. When I was like 15, I had two very good friends of mine basically sexually assault me. I don't want to get into too many details because I don't feel super comfortable getting into details with that, especially in this kind of scope.
Yeah,
but
it's a big share.
Yeah. And it's something that I buried down for a very, 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 very long time. It was something that I almost, to the point where I forgot about it. And then in my EMDR therapy, when I was doing that with my therapist back in Virginia, it's something that came to the surface. And I was like, this happened. And she's like, well, no wonder you have so many trust issues.
Isn't it awesome how therapists can speak so candidly about that stuff? Like they're just, they're just like, well, you know.
She goes, you had this stuff happen with your mom. You had this stuff, happen with your people you considered to be your best friends, people you trusted the most in the world, at the time. And then your brother-in-law goes and murders your niece. It was just like this stack of trust that just got destroyed throughout my life. And and so when I didn't even know that the office was closing at the hospital. Someone that I was actually in the psychiatric ward with, who I maintained contact with over time, she's the one that actually told me, because she was like, I'm having a really crappy week. This is what's going on. She told me that they're closing the office down, and that she used that service a lot, and now here they go, they're closing it down, and she was just like destroyed by that, and that's
hard.
Yeah, it's crazy, and you know, that office was right next to one of the other offices that I had to go to. And I would see people going into that office, in and out of that office every day, every time I went up to the other office I had to go to.
So it was definitely getting utilized.
It was, even during COVID, it was still being used quite a bit. And so it was a clear budget cut issue. And so they cut it due to budgetary concerns for sure. And, you know, it's crappy because, you know, obviously the Navy has problems with sexual assault. The Army does. The military in general has problems with sexual assault.
It's been very publicly stated.
Right. And, I mean, you ask any woman who's served in the military, and all of them have probably been harassed at least 3 times.
Yeah. At least.
That's probably a too conservative minimum. It's probably more than that. But at least harassed. I don't think every woman who served in the military has been sexually assaulted. I would hope not, at least. I don't think that that's the case. But there's definitely a lot of sexual harassment that goes around. It's usually from very senior people to very junior people. And it's not always men to women. It's also women to men. I've seen that too.
Yeah, it happened.
You've seen that too, because we were on the same carrier where it happened.
Yeah.
Not using names.
Yeah, we probably shouldn't go into that stuff, but it happens. I am aware.
Yep. And so taking out an office like that provides the services that it does to people who are victims of sexual assault is beyond crazy. And you take another $2.2 billion out of the military healthcare system, I guarantee you're gonna I don't want to think this way, but I strongly believe that the first things that will be cut will be services like sexual assault and mental health. And that's something that we as a community really can't stand to have happen.
Yeah, I don't see how that's not the case, how that's not going to be what they cut first. And that sucks because, you know, there was a time in my life where I probably thought that was like kind of the least important part about healthcare. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think people that don't use it all the time probably don't value it. But yeah, it's invaluable to me at this point. Like, you have to have it. It's just like any other type of healthcare. And I feel like they can find better ways to reduce the budget than cutting care for service members.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, I don't want to beat this into the ground too hard, but it's very problematic to me that they would even discuss decreasing what is already a Swiss cheese system.
It's already deficient at this point, and they're talking about decreasing it more.
Right.
And that's a problem.
Right. So I don't want to beat it into the ground, but it's something that I'll be keeping an eye on. You know, like I said, I know. So Mark Esper, the Secretary of Defense, is the one who said it. Trump, 2 days later, got asked about it, and I think it was on Twitter or something. He said, "No, we're not going to do that." But again, it's an election year, and
lots of posturing going on.
Yeah. Trump's trying to rely on his base, which a big part of that is veterans and military, because for some reason, I know why. But Republican presidents tend to pay the military a little bit better. You get a little bit better pay raises.
Yeah, that's true.
I can use my own service as empirical evidence of that. So, but yeah, I want to be careful with believing what comes out of anyone's mouths right now, because it's an election cycle. So
yeah, there's always going to be kind of misinformation on that. Maybe we'll get a gold presidency and everything will be different. But
all right, so we have a question. So what do you think about adjusting chaplain services be adjusted and trained and combined with mental health services. I utilize the chaplain services a lot.
So I think that it would be good for chaplains to have more training on that and to be able to take care of some of it. I don't think that combining it is a great idea because I just don't think that that's their, like, they're not a they're not a mental health professional at that point. I don't feel like they have some abilities, like they can listen to you and they could be like a social worker type person.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say, I think that like the degree that they are required to have to become a chaplain, I know does have to do somewhat with counseling. I don't remember the exact.
So I guess we need to be specific about terms. Like they could be utilized as a counselor. I believe that, but they're not a psychiatrist,
right?
And they shouldn't be billed as such. And but yeah, I think that they could be utilized to provide counseling, and I think that that's a valuable tool, and especially underway.
Right. Yeah, I was gonna say I would say that I think chaplains are underutilized.
Yeah.
I feel that more people could get a benefit from the chaplain corps. I think the biggest reason that people avoid it is because of religion. There's a lot of people who are either agnostic, atheist, or who really just don't want to deal with religion. And because of that, they avoid chaplains. But they're really good neutral third party, and the Navy gives them a lot of protection to be able, you can talk to them.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I had a few points where I think I had considered it when I was in, but I was always afraid that something was going to happen to me. I was always afraid that I had been lied to a lot in my military career by people above me, a lot, like regularly. Right. Like it's very common to be lied to. So when they said, "Oh yeah, you're safe. They're not going to do anything," I didn't believe it. I was confident that if I were to go there and share some of the problems that I had, that it would get back to my chain of command and it would be detrimental to my career. Right. That's how I felt. And if they could find a way to really guarantee that and make it clear to people, through a track record or whatever, that you can go share with the chaplain, you can talk to them about your problems, and it's not going to get back to your chain of command and stuff like that.
Right.
Then I think that would be a good thing to show the sailors. And with the religion part, like I've gone back and forth in my life on religion. I was raised in the church, did youth group, did lots of volunteer work, and I think the church does some great things. At this point in my life, I don't think I would consider myself religious. I wouldn't consider myself like Christian. I'm spiritual. I believe in there are a lot of things like forces inside you and in the world that like are kind of like a spiritual thing. And I think you need to address that. But I would encourage people with the whole religion thing not to like shy away from the chaplain just because it's related to a religion, because you can I've read books like Wild at Heart by John Eldredge. Great book on like men's issues, very religiously based. But I could kind of pick that out of it and say like, all right, well, he's looking at it from this perspective and maybe I don't agree with that per se, but it's still valuable information. And even if you remove that out of it, it still makes sense and it's still valuable information.
Right.
So,
I mean, so from my standpoint, I am religious. I don't like to talk about it a lot on the podcast just because I don't want that to be a detractor. We're not here to talk about religion. We're here to talk about military mental health. Mm-hmm. And so because of that, I try to keep that part of my life separate from this a little bit.
Yeah.
But I mean, I am religious. I grew up in the church. I worked at a Christian summer camp. I was a youth leader when I was in the Navy at a church in Connecticut. So I've been very religious. I have had religious struggles. I've had spiritual struggles over the years. Big one being when I was on the Truman. And my problem with chaplains, I actually saw a chaplain for a while when I was on the Reagan, and my biggest problem with the chaplain corps is and I could see this being a reason why some people would shy away from chaplains, is that they tend to push religion really hard when people go to see them. At least in my experience, I can't say that all chaplains are like that, but also, I mean, at the end of the day, when they go to eat lunch, they go to eat dinner, they're rubbing elbows with the reactor officer and with your division officers and everyone else. And so you have to put stock in how confidential that they'll be. And it's just like that. It's the same way if you're going to go see the ship psychiatrist. And I think that does detract a little bit from people going to see it. I know it detracted from me, so I can only speak from my experiences. Yep. So, I know for a fact that detracted from me from getting help at certain points, because I didn't want something that I said to a chaplain to then get told to the reactor officer while they're eating dinner together. Like, and it's like, because I remember we were talking to the chaplain on Reagan, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I get a lot of you guys from reactor all the time." Okay, how much are you telling other people about me? Like,
yeah, that's I get the statement, but that's also a little unsettling that you would say that.
Right.
But,
and how much of this is going to then get back to the reactor officer or my division officer or XYZ?
Yeah. Well, and to a point, it's probably kind of okay for him to share stuff. Like if he's getting a bunch of people from reactor and he goes like, "Yo, RO, I've seen like 40 people from your division in the last 2 weeks.
Right.
What's going on?" Like that would be probably a productive conversation.
Right.
But sharing specifics, no. Then.
Right. So I do like the idea of chaplains being more utilized. To be fair, I think they are great to people to talk to, and I think I was attracted from it because I think wrongfully, to be honest. If I'm looking at it now from my perspective now, at the time I was very, I obviously I had said before I didn't even want to go talk to Chip's mental health. I didn't want to talk to Chip's psych. Didn't want to talk to chaplain because I was worried about it affecting my position in my career. And how do we get to a point where that becomes normalized is really, I think, the question. I think that takes a lot of work. I think it takes movement from a lot of different people, and basically people taking the leap and doing it, and then people seeing that they're not getting reprimanded or negatively affected by it.
They have to build up a track record of telling the truth and a track record of, like you said, people taking advantage of those services and not having negative effects from it.
Right.
Because right now that's not the case. Like I said, I was lied to regularly. And, I don't think I remember anybody specifically getting hung out to dry by the chaplain or the ship psych, but I'd been hung out to dry with my leadership enough times I wasn't willing to take the risk.
Right.
And that was just where I was at.
For realsies. I get that for sure. So moving on, I think we'll move on from that. So something I've been starting to do is I've been checking Science Daily, which is like a research portal, I guess you'd say, for different research related stuff. And they have a whole section on mental health, depression, and they break it down for mental health, like depression.
Science Daily.
Yeah.
I'm gonna write that down.
And so about a little over a week ago, they put out this. It was like just over a week ago. Something, and we talk about it on here, but I want to back it up with proof, I guess. And so there's a research study coming out of Massachusetts General Hospital. And so it's basically titled "Social Connection is the Strongest Protective Factor for Depression." We talk about it all the time on here.
Yay, COVID. Yay, COVID.
Right. But there's other ways to have that. I feel like we have a pretty good, you and I specifically have a pretty good social connection just by doing this every week. There are other ways to build that social connection.
Yeah, I intentionally don't contact you much during the week because I kind of value this conversation and I want to keep it pure.
Right.
And I've actually used that to a point now, even in my relationship with my wife. Like I feel like with her being in Texas for quite a while, I call her too much and it actually detracts from it.
I know that feeling.
So with this, I think this is a very valuable relationship to me. I very much value this. This is very valuable time for me. I prioritize it very heavily. I try not to miss this podcast. I've only missed, I think, one or two of them. And it's,
we both have missed some for various reasons.
Yeah, but it's very high priority for me because this, especially with COVID, this is like a social interaction thing that we both get that I think is beneficial for both of us. And I hope it's beneficial for our listeners too.
Right.
But
yeah,
it's nice.
Yeah, go ahead.
it's nice to get the interaction on Facebook and stuff too. People being able to chime in and join the conversation.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm gonna definitely. I think we're gonna continue doing it this way, doing it Facebook Live, and then also then publishing on YouTube and podcast distributions.
Yeah, I think some people very much enjoy the video aspect of it too, being able to put a face to the voice, kind of.
I'm still working on getting that good. I think I have a solution finally this week for making sure video and audio is synced, because if I use the recording, the Squadcast recording stuff for the audio for the video, which is higher quality audio, it's not going to be in sync because it doesn't account for the delay between us very well. And so when I go to sync the audio, I can't unless I were to separate those two out completely, and then even then it doesn't sync up right. And so I have been trying my darndest to figure that out, and I think this week it's going to be good. I think I figured it out.
Cool. I'll check it out. That's awesome. I appreciate the effort.
I've been trying to do a lot of things to make this better. But I took the link for that one article that I was talking about. I put that in the Facebook Live chat, and I'll try to add it as a link into our YouTube video, and I'll add it as a link into the podcast description, if I can do that. I'm not sure if I can, but I'm going to try. I know I can do it in the YouTube description. I don't know if I can do it in the podcast description.
Yeah, I've seen people link stuff all the time for the YouTube description stuff.
Right. So I'll put that link into the description. If you're watching, should be down below. Okay. So another one on there, because and I think we can actually have an actual discussion more so about this one. So this is from July 30th, Yale School of Public Health. Major depressive episodes far more common than previously believed, which I think is very apparent. So when I attempted suicide, I was going through a major depression episode. I'm a little bit different than I think the average human when it comes to mental health stuff, but that's another story. But the number of adults, I'm just going to read this part real quick. The number of adults in the United States who suffer from major depression episodes at some point in their life is far higher than previously believed, a new study by Yale School of Public Health finds. So we discussed that a little bit.
Yeah, I think part of it is people don't understand. There's a very, very big stigma around the word depression, and people don't want to consider the idea that what they're feeling might be depression. And and on top of that, because of that, I don't think they understand what depression really is, or what those feelings mean. They just they're going through a phase or whatever they want to call it. And so I think that you're right. I think that, there was I can't remember who made the statement. There's a statement I read one time from a psychologist who was talking about that, at some point in their life, every person on this planet will show symptoms of a mental health issue at some point in their life. And just because they're showing, it doesn't mean there's anything wrong. Sometimes that's just life. People go through difficult things. Life is not easy. Life is full of problems. And I think that we need to acknowledge that. And I like that study says it's much more common than we thought. And I think that's just, they're finally calling a spade a spade. They're finally saying that these bouts of, these mental lows, that's what it is. It's depression. And
right.
Yeah.
Right. And so within here, it also says, the model shows that the probability of someone having a first major depressive episode is especially high during adolescence. We also know from other research that having a first major depressive episode increases the likelihood you'll have a second one. And so this means that anything we can do to prevent or treat episodes among young people could lead to larger health benefits over the course of their life. So, I know for a fact, 100%, now that I know what major depression is, and I know that, what those episodes look like, now I've realized all the times I've had them over the course of my life. I remember having them as a kid. Probably 10, 11 years old was probably the first time I had a major depression episode. It's something that definitely increased with frequency due to stuff that happened in the Navy. The Navy definitely negatively affected me from a mental aspect, in a lot of different ways. Mostly because yeah, I think the number one thing that really affected my mental health the most was the uncertainty behind day-to-day life. I didn't know what was going to happen every day. I didn't know I would have a plan, but that plan was going to change almost every time.
Yeah.
And the anxiety of that and everything else would often help perpetuate the depression when I would have depressive episodes. And it was, looking back at it, I had, especially on Reagan. Reagan was way worse than Truman. I remember so many days, like even on deployment, we'd wake up and like, I just don't want to get out of bed. It would be great if I could just not be alive right now. So I think that is very true just in my own life. The whole, if you have that first one, they're going to become more frequent.
And with me, I don't really remember any. I can't think of right now, and maybe I need to dig into this and think about it, because you do block things out. That happens. I don't remember anything specific from my childhood other than my parents getting divorced. That would maybe be considered, what I felt there could maybe be considered a major depressive episode. But other than that, I don't really remember having too much of that when I was a kid. In the Navy, absolutely, especially the first, like, when I first got to Reagan, like I felt like I was able to push through it better, but I definitely was having major depressive episodes.
Right.
And, that stuff just piles up over time, and you get to where like you can't just like shut it off or ignore it. And that's kind of where what I got to is like, I was just trying to like push it down and ignore it. Like, it'll get better, but it doesn't get better. And, I wasn't dealing with it. I didn't have the tools to deal with it. And it just gets worse and worse and worse until you kind of fall apart. And that was kind of where it started for me, because I had some highs and lows in the pipeline too, but all in all, the pipeline went very well for me. And there was a lot of certainty in kind of what you're doing day to day in the pipeline.
Right.
But once you get to the ship, like you said, like, you don't know what's happening day to day. You're dealing with a lot of different people, and there's, very impactful things happen very quickly in your life.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'll never forget, because this happened so many times. You'd work your butt off during the week, so that on Friday when you're in port, Friday, well, let's call it early on Friday, you get, let's get out of here 10:30, 11 o'clock on Friday. So you stay late a couple days, you work hard on your duty days, Friday comes around, someone from another division messed up and now everyone has to stay.
Yeah.
Like, that destroyed me every time that happened. And it got to the point where I was like, I'm just never going to expect to leave early ever again. And that, although that's a good mentality, that kind of destroyed my morale too. So, like, obviously, I think now I'm much more equipped to deal with the disappointment. But back then, I was not, and that would destroy me.
Yeah, and looking back on that, like the way the leadership styles changed. So, like when I first got to Reagan, it very much was like how you talked about, like getting to go home early was a thing. Like that was, it was expected that when you're on your duty day, and for those that don't know, a duty day is you're going to be on the ship for 24 hours. You own the ship basically for 24 hours. And on your duty day, you didn't sleep. You just worked. And, your boss would leave you a list. You'd work your butt off. You might catch an hour or two of sleep on the couch, but you just work. But the next day you were beating the flag out. You're going home.
Yep.
And then slowly that started eroding. Like then it was, okay, you have to stay till training at 10 a.m. And then it was noon. And then it was not at all. And then, Aloha Fridays went away. And it gets to the point where, like, when I was work center soup, I explained it to like my chief. Is like, what is the incentive for these people to work so hard on a duty day anymore? Like, they have no incentive. They're going to be here anyways.
Right.
So why, as a sailor, why would I stay up all night and kill myself to do this when I know tomorrow I'm going to be here anyways? And if I do all this today, you're not going to have a list of stuff for me tomorrow. I know that. I'm just going to be sitting in berthing staring at the wall. Or sitting in the plant staring at the wall.
It's because I told you to.
Yeah, and that was like always their answer. And looking back at now, that answer just makes me angry, because that's not leadership. That's not how that works. That's like the whole, like, most of leadership is making sure it happens, not just telling them what to do. And if you're doing that, you're failing as a leader. I want to tell you, I'm talking to you personally. If you say that to your sailors, like, you're failing. That's not how this works.
And I have said that before. Full disclosure, I have said that before. And I know it's a bad answer, but sometimes you get so frustrated. And you're like, because we have to do it. Just please, I lost this fight.
Yeah, well, and sometimes that is what it is. But like when that's the norm, when that's like the norm, that's what happens is like you show up to work, you don't even hear what you need to do for work until 10 a.m.
Right.
And then you start on the work. So because you started at 10 a.m., you don't finish till 6, 7 at night. And then you start the cycle all over again the next day. It's just, it's demoralizing to the people who work for you. And also, like you said, when you ask people to do all this extra work overnight and everything and to get ahead, and then you reward them with being stuck there for, just in case, that's not a sustainable model. If you do that for like a week or two because you have something important that needs to get done, fine. But what's the norm? Like, what incentive do they have to go above and beyond? When they go above and beyond, they're rewarded with either sitting on their butt and not doing anything, but still being at work, or more work.
Right.
It's not, you can't just, they could say till they're blue in the face, like, well, it's your duty, sense of duty. Well, I had a very strong sense of duty joining the military. I still don't want to be jerked around, because that's not, one, it's dishonest. Two, it's not, I still need downtime. Like, every person needs some downtime. And when you're just taking my downtime and sticking me on the couch and I'm just waiting for work, that's demoralizing.
Right.
And, yeah.
Oh, man. It's leadership. We always end up talking about leadership every episode. We talk about
we've both seen a lot. We've both seen a lot of it, and I'm not in a leadership position really right now, but that's something I want to test myself in, because I've been in some leadership positions, but I know I was a garbage leader when I was on Reagan. There was a few things I did well, but for the most part, I was terrible. I didn't handle conflict well. Mainly conflict. Conflict was like my where I performed the poorest, was dealing with conflict. And there's a lot of conflict to be had on an aircraft carrier. And I kind of want that one back. I want to do it again. I want to be a manager, or, be a leader again.
Yeah. I'm hoping to try. So I guess they just fired one of the shift supervisors at Courier. And so one of the plant managers saw me yesterday, and he goes, "How's it going?" And I was like, "Man, real good. I think I could almost fill that shift supervisor position."
What'd he say?
He laughed. He just laughed. He goes, "Maybe." I was like,
slide in under the tag on that one and go right to that position. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it pays more than I'm making now, so I'm.
Yeah.
But I know how to supervise people. I'm a leader.
I've done this before.
Yeah, they definitely want me to learn all the machines first. So, which is
you don't. So it's one of those things. Like, there's different positions that, watching how people lead and different managers. Like, you don't have to know everything to be.
You need to know the basics.
You need to know the basics, and like, so for my job, there's different areas. Like, you have the market itself, which is a completely different animal, and then you have the technical side of like how electricity gets transferred, which is more so my side. I'm kind of one foot in each camp. I have to know a little bit about each. But there's managers that, like, one of the guys that I worked with, who's my boss, like, not my direct boss, but the person above them, just moved over to markets, and he straight up said, he's like, "I'm real dumb when it comes to markets. I don't know anything." But he's learning now. But he's in charge, but he's learning, so it's kind of a weird spot to be in. But he knows a whole lot about how the grid works, and most of the people in markets know nothing about that. So he's in a unique position where he has a lot of knowledge that they don't have, and they have a lot of knowledge that he doesn't have. So he has to trust his guys, but he also has a backstop of knowledge that he can compare what they're telling him to that they don't have.
Right.
And that's valuable.
Right. Yeah. I had something. I just lost it. I hate that. I had something. I was holding it, and then boom, it was gone.
Yeah.
I had something good.
It'll come back.
It was a real good nugget.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah. Boom. Since we're talking about markets, you want to talk about California?
Ooh. Yeah.
As an ISO person, I think you have insight that a lot of other people don't really have. I mean, obviously it's not your market, but it is a market. and you have more insight than normal people do.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. So I'm sure people have seen the news that California is having rolling blackouts right now. And what's going on there, regardless of what you might be hearing in the news and stuff. So one, they have wildfires, which is that's a significant challenge. Kind of how if you look at the grid, kind of a basic overview. So you have transmission lines that carry power to different areas of the United States. And you have generators that are attached to the distribution and transmission systems. And what I mean by distribution and transmission are the big lines. That's like, high voltage, carry a lot of power. Distribution is like the stuff that goes to your house. So lower voltage. But there are still generators that generate onto the distribution system. That happens. Anyways, so you have to figure out, you could not build like all of the generators in Northern California and transfer all the energy to Southern California. That wouldn't work. The lines wouldn't support it. And, if you take out one of those lines, you are screwed. You wouldn't be able to do anything about it. Right. So you have to distribute your generation and your assets and your transmission in a way that allows you to maintain reliability. So the problems that they are having right now, they're having wildfires that are taking out transmission lines. So that restricts them. They have to split the transmission system and then support with generation in different areas. So that's a problem. And the other problem is they're having a heat wave. So they have very, very high load. Load being how much electricity you need is very high, which places a strain on the system as well. And on top of that, they rely very, very heavily on PV solar, photovoltaic solar, and wind. Yep. So the problem with relying on those two sources too heavily is if it's hazy or the sun isn't shining, like at night, you have no PV solar. And if it's not windy, you have almost no wind. So if you're relying on those sources to be there to support capacity, and then you don't have those, then you don't have enough capacity. And if you can't transfer the power from another place because the transmission line is out, it doesn't work. So you end up with rolling blackouts like they have right now. And the overall thing that I know from an ISO perspective is that a lot of this is that California has prioritized wind and solar and progressive policy over reliability. And that's a lot of politics. And, I would blame that partly on the ISO and partly on the politicians in that area, because the ISO does have a bit of a say, but I don't know what happened. It could be that they pushed back and said that, hey, you're not providing the correct market incentives and this is going to be a problem. And the powers that be just said, we don't care. This is the way we're going to do it.
Right.
Or it could be that they didn't analyze it well and they didn't plan well, and this is where they're at. But what they need to be doing is they need to provide the correct market incentives to make sure that they have the right assets to keep the power on. And right now they haven't done that, and they're seeing the results right now. Right. Because so what you have for stuff like this is you need like gas generators, gas, coal, nuclear, stuff like that. Preferably not coal. Like, they don't really build coal plants anymore. They build gas basically.
Right.
And you need those generators because they can come on demand. You can start them up on demand and provide power. If there's a transmission line there, it'll work. It doesn't matter if you have sun, rain, shine, tidal wave, right. Doesn't matter. And you need that to a point because the sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow. So that's the hard part about renewables like that, is you have to back it up with reserves.
Right.
And it appears to me that California has not created an environment in which reserves are incentivized. They're incentivizing the hell out of wind and solar, but they're not incentivizing reserves enough to have enough reserves on tap. And, another thing, people come back a lot of times and say like, well, what about battery storage? Well, battery storage is a good thing and they're building a lot of it, but we're talking about, the analogy I like to use is like, that's like you're trying to bail out a lake with a coffee can, basically. Like battery storage is very, very, very low capacity. And we're talking about backing up thousands of megawatts.
Right.
You're talking about bigger batteries will back up maybe 4 megawatts or so. And, it's instant on, which is nice. So you can chase the ramp a little bit, but you need a lot more capacity.
Right. Batteries will help you in that transition between where your sun's starting to set or and you're trying to switch from solar to like gas.
And even that, it's not going to help much. It'll help. So if we're truly going to go with battery as the savior, that's going to take decades, because they're going to have to go to basically a microgrid setup. and like have each town have its own little microgrid with battery backup.
Right.
And, we could do that. That's very, very, very expensive. And it creates other problems where you have distributed generation like that. Like you have more exposure to issues. If you lose your local generator, then maybe your power goes out.
Right.
And whereas right now you have centralized generation, and it takes a lot to take down the power and have an outage, because you have all the centralized generation, you have transmission. So you have, 4 or 5 different ways you can get power to that area. And if one goes out, it might not necessarily be an issue. And,
Right.
Yeah. So it's a giant puzzle. And this is like my job every day, is I solve this giant puzzle every day to create the market. And, I have a unique perspective in that I see how this works. And, we have lots of wind and solar, and it's great. It's a great asset, but you can't rely on it for reliability.
Right.
You can't guarantee that it's going to be there.
It's great for minimizing basically the use of gas. That's what it's good for. Is during times of wind and times of sunshine, it's good for reducing the amount of gas. But you still have to have the ability to load power the grid with neither of those two things. And part of the reason California is getting a lot from us nuclear advocates, because they took a great nuclear power plant and shut it down 20, 30 years early, with San Onofre. If they had San Onofre, there would have been 0 blackouts.
Well, I don't know that
I don't know if that's 100% true, but that's what I read. And I
don't know if I could.
But
I don't know if I can say that for certain, because I don't have a map of their grid. Like I could do a study if I had like their EMS system and stuff like that, and I could tell you exactly if that's true.
Right.
But if somebody at CAISO, California ISO, could absolutely tell you that.
Right.
But I can't say it for certain, but it definitely wouldn't have hurt. They say they were short like 2,000 megawatts, I think, or something like that.
Right.
San Onofre, even if they had operated. So what they had an issue, they had a leak. So they replaced their steam generators, and steam generators are the things that make steam to create the electricity. So they had a leak in a steam generator, and they had an issue with basically like a resonance, where the tubes were basically shaking and breaking.
Right.
So they had figured out that they could operate still at like 70% power and avoid that resonance, and they would have been fine. So that's still like 700 megawatts.
Right.
That's still a huge chunk of what they were short. And that definitely would have helped. And also, but they shut them down because is California. It's very politically unpopular. You put the word leak and nuclear in the same sentence, and game over. They shut them down.
Right.
But they didn't need to do that, and they did it, and it sucks. And then also they heavily incentivize wind and solar. They regulate heavily gas plants. It makes it much less profitable for utilities to build gas plants, and those are what we would call market signals. And you need to provide the correct market signals to you can provide market signals to get the energy cleaner, but you also need to provide the signal to remain reliable. And they have prioritized clean over reliable, and they're seeing the profit of that, or the project of that right now.
Right.
But yeah, they shut down San Onofre, and they've also just voted to shut down Diablo Canyon.
Yep.
So they're taking 2 base load, another large base load generator off the grid when they're having blackouts right now. And it makes no sense to me.
Right.
Like you're already blacking out on purpose. Like, they say, it could say all they want that's not on purpose. Like they did this. This is on purpose.
They opened it.
Like,
they opened the breaker.
Like if you have designed your grid to the point where you cannot support maximum load without having those renewables, it is a poor design. That is not a good idea.
Yes.
Because you get stuff like this where, and also I also learned something awesome. So I was like, if I said something to one of my friends that lives in California, it's like, if I was in California at this point, after all this stuff, I'd be putting a generator in. And they're like, yeah, that sounds good, right? Well, emissions don't allow you to do that in California. Yeah. You can't have a home generator.
Right.
I was like, well, talk about being in between a rock and a hard place. Like,
yep. You basically have to get home solar with like a Tesla Powerwall, I think is what they're called. And then you're still going to lose. You got to cut everything off once you go to your Powerwall. Like you got to cut off a lot of your loads.
Yeah, well, just like I said, like those batteries, they help to a point, but it's not going to cover everything. Right. And that's just the reality of the technology. I think we should still be building it, and we should be testing it, and we should be making the technology better. But that's not, battery technology is not going to save the grid.
Yeah.
At least not in the next 20 years, at least.
Home battery backup is great if you want to keep your food cold.
And that's it.
That's why I stopped.
shut the AC units off, shut
Yeah.
the lights off, shut everything else off, and keep your refrigerator running.
Yeah,
That's
you
about
can,
it.
you can probably run a couple lights,
Yeah.
maybe a TV.
Yeah, and even that's limited. When the battery runs out, it runs out.
Right. I mean, the Powerwall is pretty great. I have to read more about it. I know that it's meant to be a solution to run completely off the grid, but I don't know how reliable that is and what the megawatt capacity of that battery is, et cetera, et cetera. But
yeah, I calculated out, and I've heard it's getting more and more cost effective.
Right.
But when I calculated out when I lived in Arizona, because we had solar, I would have to use an obscene amount of energy to make it ever pay for itself. It didn't make financial sense. If I was doing it just to use less power off the grid and to live cleaner,
supplement.
that would make kind of sense because I'm being cleaner. But it was never gonna pay for itself in the life of the battery. It wouldn't pay for itself.
Right.
At least the calculation I did.
Right. So yeah, I mean, obviously, they got to figure that out. They're going to have to figure that out for sure.
Yeah. In my perfect world, they would stop. They would not shut down Diablo Canyon, and they would build more gas plants. Perfectly, they would build another nuke in the area, but I don't think that's realistic. I think that they need to build some more gas plants, including some jets, which jets are basically inefficient peaker plants that they can fire up and get a significant amount of megawatts very, very quickly. Mm-hmm. We use those to cover like the ramp, because you have a big ramp in the evening now when solar's dropping off and load is coming up. So you have to catch that ramp. So we have what we call jets and stuff like that.
Right.
That they're inefficient, they're expensive, but they can chase the ramp. They can fire up within 30 minutes. You can go from cold to full power in 30 minutes. So
it's pretty awesome. That's pretty fast.
And you're talking, I was talking about those batteries being 4 megawatts. Those jets are between 25 to 100 megawatts. They're a significant amount of power.
Yeah. Well, I think we're going to start wrapping up this week. Another great week, another good podcast in the books. If you're listening to this right now after the fact, we now broadcast live on Facebook. So you can come, you can message us. I'm starting to create events once Jared and I are able to settle on dates and times for the podcast, so I'll keep doing that. This one was 10 a.m. on a Saturday. This is when Jared and I had time to do it. Next week it might be on a Thursday at 5. Unfortunately, with our various work schedules, that's how this works out. But yeah, so I'll keep an eye out for events being posted to the Reboot page, and feel free to join us. You can interact with us. I have one screen looking at Jared, and then my other screen is looking at the Facebook Live and news articles and everything else. So you feel free to drop in, ask a question. I know Jessica was here today. She asked some, I think, very important questions, and we're more than willing to talk about what you think is important. Because a big part of what this is us helping you guys and trying to talk through different things and different solutions and stuff like that.
Yeah. All right. So with the YouTube stuff, so you're posting this stuff to YouTube now?
Yeah. Every episode gets posted to YouTube. Every episode you can rewatch the live on Facebook, and then also you can nab it on your podcast distro of choice.
Yeah, it's something you can do if you want to be reminded when when we post, because it might be we typically post on a Saturday, but if we're recording live, that's going to be more variable. But if you just want to be reminded, you could always subscribe on the YouTube page, and that'll give you an alert when the videos post.
Right. You have to hit subscribe, and then there's a little bell you hit for notifications.
Yep. And then that'll you get a little, if you have the YouTube app on your phone, it'll bing, it'll pop up and say, hey, there's a new video posted for them.
Right.
And that, if you just want to be reminded, that's something, you don't have to, but it's something. I have 2 or 3 pages that I subscribe to because I like their content and I like being informed when they post something new.
Right. But yeah, and also, if you want to be on the podcast, let us know. It's as simple as me sending you a link, you click on it, and boom, you're live with us. It is literally that easy.
Yeah, I got to contact. I know we have one person that said that they wanted to be on in September, so I'll probably contact them today.
Yeah.
And see what they have to say. But anyways, here I'll share the socials, and we can start wrapping up here. So, like you said, you can get to us on Facebook Live And we also have the YouTube now, but our Facebook is Facebook.com/reboot pod. So Facebook/reboot pods with an S. Our email is rebootpod@gmail.com. And Twitter, we're at reboot_pod. So, you can get a hold of us if you want to be on the podcast, if you want to ask a question, if you want mental health services, or if you just want to engage one of us, you can get a hold of us, and we're pretty available.
For sure. I'm just trying to. So, yeah, and so if you search YouTube for Reboot the War Isn't Over Yet, you can find us there. We have to change up our social stuff. I think we'll take the Twitter out. I don't really use it.
Yeah, I don't use Twitter.
No one's messaged me yet. Like, I pretty much set that up. I was gonna start tweeting, and I was like, I hate Twitter. I'm not.
So my opinion, I know it's good for some people because some people use Twitter, and I want to reach as many people as we can. But if we don't use it, we don't use it. And I don't use Twitter. I think it's an awful way to communicate. It's just little blurbs. You don't get the whole story.
I had it there as a way for people to contact us if they wanted, but I think we'll take that out, and then we can put like maybe we'll figure out the YouTube link or whatever, because I forget. I'll figure that out, and I'll change up the one page. But yeah, so that we're gonna wrap this one up, and we will see you guys next week. Keep fighting the good fight, and we are still live on Facebook.
Hi, Facebook.
This is our after thing. No one's watching right now. It's okay. It's all right. We had people pop in and out throughout the whole thing. But to those of you guys on Facebook, if you're watching this after the fact, this is your chance to interact without having to be on camera. And I think that's why I really like the notion of going to Facebook Live too. Is if you are afraid of getting on the camera, then this is your opportunity to just talk with us without any real repercussions. You don't have to say anything else after the fact if you don't want to. You can ask questions. But that being said, I'm going to end the Facebook Live now as well. And we'll hopefully see you guys next time.
You've been listening to Reboot with David Kagi and Jared Standerford. We hope that you've gotten some useful information from this podcast, and we want you to know we're proud to have you in our family. Mental health is important, and we hope that we've helped break down some barriers. Be sure to catch us next time, and if you have questions, comments, or if you'd like to be on the next show, send us an email at rebootpod@gmail.com. This is Reboot, signing off.